to the Divine Nurture community, where we speak truthful, meaningful, and deep conversation. Today, we do have our first guest here at the Divine Nurture community who's here to share some knowledge and the energy that's going on right now. So, this is Dr. Philip Young. But before I let him introduce himself, just wanted to remind you I'll also share this on the description where I discuss the overview of the numerology and pretty much the energy that's happening this year. So he's here to kind of help unpack that. So welcome, Dr.
Thank you.
Philip Young.
Thank you. So, yes, my name is Philip Young. I am a professional spiritual advisor, and I do most of my work using astrology, tarot, and numerology. And we are definitely in a dynamic year. It is a 1 year with 2026, also the fire horse year for Chinese astrology. But there's just a lot going on in the sky that's going to have a continuing and ongoing impact at levels that humanity hasn't seen for quite some time. And what I'll be sharing is the cycles astrologically that indicate why that is, and also talk about the duration of how long we can expect it to continue to last.
Mm. So great. So with that, how would you to get us grounded or get us to set the stage? How would you describe 2026 in 3 words?
The three words I would use is brace for impact. Those are the three words because
Why?
it's going to be a very intense, transformative year. Not that it hasn't been really since 2020, but I think in it and then after it, we'll look back and go that this was the year, in the same way that people would look at the bombing of Pearl Harbor or the attack on Fort Sumter during setting off the Civil War, that this is going to be a period where we significantly know that everything in the world is changing.
Mhm. So that's interesting. I do agree, but also I wanted to get into more of like the planetary shifts. I know as we discuss or talk about sometimes people when it comes to astrology, they are only aware of their sun sign or the big trees, right? So the outer planets not so much. So I just
Right.
wanted to kind of get into this. How do big planetary shift affect us as a society, or with all the global systems that we're currently seeing that are definitely outdated?
Sure.
Um, yeah.
So what most people, like you say, are familiar with their sun sign, and they have something called a solar return, which is essentially their birthday. Each year, the sun returns to the position it was at the time
Mhm.
of your birth. But when you go to the outer planets, the time that it takes them to return to a position they were in previously varies on the length of their time going around the sun. So, for example, if we look at the planet Jupiter, it takes 12 years to come back to its position. So, for your birthday, it's 1 year. For Jupiter, it's 12 years. For the next point going outward, working our way to Pluto being the furthest out, Saturn takes roughly 27 to 29 years. And then there's Chiron and Uranus, they're next, and they take roughly, Chiron takes 50 years, Uranus takes 84 years. And then Neptune takes 147, and Pluto takes 247 to almost 250 years. So these are
Yeah.
large cycles, especially as we go out. And then when we look at them in terms of history, where those points are by sign, because they are in signs just like your sun is in a sign. And we try to identify what was going on historically that would apply to the current age. And what is significant is that all three of the main outer points, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are moving through the signs they were moving through that were previously major periods of upheaval on a global scale.
Mm.
But they did those things on individual time periods. These three are happening all at the same time. So the level of change that people are probably attuned to, whether they're very attuned and tuned in, or whether they're just kind of like what the heck's going on in the world, everybody's feeling it because it is just that strong and that significant.
Mm. How would you say, maybe walk us through like these um planet going into these signs? What are the effect? For example, Pluto in Aquarius, for someone who's new to astrology, when
Sure.
you say those two, they're probably like, what does that mean? So
Right.
in just simple, I guess, simple and clear way of communicating, what does that mean at a personal level and also as a collective. So going into all these big sign obviously are going into, excuse me, air signs and fire signs.
Certainly. So the the first of all, each planet has a role that it performs energetically. And
Mm,
Pluto is about major transformation and upheaval. So when Pluto is moving through a sign, it is upheaving whatever that sign is responsible for. It just finished its time in Capricorn, which was done on November the 19th, 2024. And when it moves through Capricorn, it's an upheaval in the systems that run society, business, whether we're talking about economics or we're talking about government, all of those systems where there's leadership and there's an effect on the economy, that's Capricorn's sort of rule. And where Pluto is doing work, it brings about upheaval in that. And people who might be familiar will remember that in 2008 there was a financial crisis in the housing market. 2008 is when Pluto went into Capricorn, actually. So,
Hello.
yeah, exactly. Hello, and it's going to be, it's finished up its time, and now it's moving into Aquarius. Now, if we look at it cyclically, if we go back and we go, well, what was happening 247 years ago when Pluto was in Capricorn and going into Aquarius? Well, that's when the United States Revolutionary War took place. And that revolution brought about essentially a new nation state that was very different than pre-existing nation states. There really was no other place like the United States on the planet in the global economy and the global political realm. And so the United States was something very, very new. Now, when Pluto comes back around on itself, it usually means that a system is going to be upheaved in a similar way, which means there's a revolutionary energy dealing with the United States. Now, unfortunately, I wish I could say that everything gets better, but we have historical examples where that doesn't turn out to be the case, hence the Dark Ages. And there's a reason they're called the Dark Ages. And so what we know is that the United States being a global leader, really the dominant superpower that it's been since World War II, is experiencing a tremendous amount of internal upheaval, which is in alignment with the Pluto return specifically for it because the United States is experiencing its Pluto return. And so what we can see now is a reshaping of society as spends its time in Aquarius. How we think about society is going to experience major upheaval, which we're already dealing with. And some of it's going to be tied to obviously AI's arrival. Some of it's going to be tied to Pluto going through those systems in Capricorn and realizing that the university systems are problematic, healthcare is problematic, the political systems are problematic, and they can't be ignored any longer. And that's where we are right now, is that we're really facing the kind of comeuppance of what it's time to deal with. And that's just Pluto. That's not even taking into account what's going on with Neptune or what's going on with Uranus, because those are also major players that historically, where they are now, have key historical moments. And they do largely focus on what's happening in the United States chart, because the United States has its own chart, just like you have a birth chart, I have a birth chart. The United States has a chart as well. And these transits that are happening are hitting the United States in very particular ways. So Pluto is just one of them. Neptune, which governs belief and imagination and spirituality, is now in Aries. It was in Pisces up until January 26th, and then it went into Aries on January 26th of this year. It's going to stay there for the next 14 years. But as part of its cycle, the previous time it was in these two signs was the Civil War.
Wow.
And what we're really talking about with the Civil War was the impact on the slave trade globally that was affected by what happened in the Civil War in the United States. It didn't, of course, eliminate slavery worldwide, but it did create a shift in what was going on in terms of whether or not the United States was going to continue to be a slaveholding country. And it was, again, a rising economy and a dominant economy. So once again, now we're talking about an echo. So every time Neptune goes through Pisces and Aries, there is some sort of significant change in world belief. And
Mm,
that's what we're experiencing right now.
wow.
And so the last one, again, to like pile it on, is Uranus is currently in Taurus, getting ready to go into Gemini, which it will do on April the 25th of this year. And that period of time, Uranus's breakthroughs, it's sudden shifts, it's shocking energy. I mean, it's like, whoa,
Right.
this is incredible. So the last time it was in those two signs was the Great Depression and World War II for the United States, which was also a world depression and a world war.
Right.
And the thing that's interesting is Uranus's cycle at 84 years means that not only was it in those two signs during the Great Depression and World War II, it was in those two signs during the Civil War and during the Revolutionary War. So it's a lot. I mean, there's no way around it to tell people that the period that we're living through right now is very dramatic, very
Mhm.
intense. It does have a time limit. I mean, all of these points move through their signs and they get settled into the new sign, and then the world kind of adjusts. But right now, we're in the upheaving and the shocking moment, and 2026 is a pivotal year
Mhm.
in that Pluto has been spending at least a year plus in Aquarius, but Neptune and Uranus, they're changing those signs this year. And they're
Mhm.
not the only ones. Chiron, which is the wounded healer, is moving from Aries into Taurus, and that's going to happen this year on June the 19th. But it will go back into Aries and permanently
Mhm.
stay in Taurus next year on April the 24th, I believe it is April the 14th, maybe. Then it will be in the next new sign. So what we have is the outer points, they're all changing signs very close to each other. And there was an astrologer in England, I believe Steve Judd did the work and found out the last time you had this kind of collection of change with these outer points together, is so close, like within a couple of years of each other, was about
Mhm.
17,000 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So all the cycles repeat. Some of them take extremely long periods of time, but nothing's new under the sun.
Mhm.
It's just that what we're going to be feeling is so much change so rapidly. And the way I've generally described it is it's like being caught in a hurricane.
Mm.
And how do you get through a hurricane? Because the hurricane is going to do what the hurricane's going to do.
Right.
And to a large extent, we're really, for the most part, most of us are kind of riding it out and waiting to see. The example I would use is the latest shift that's happened, of course, is the war in Iran that's affecting gas prices. So what
Mhm.
we see on a daily basis, what I see is I drive by a gas station on a regular trip to a place that I do some work for, and I've watched that price go up each time I've driven by. And that's letting
Mm.
me know what's happening on a global scale that's reaching me at a personal level, right?
Level. Yes.
And right now, there's nothing to do but wait and see. For most of us, that's what it is. So then the question is, with what I do and trying to work with people on an individual level, it's just help them navigate it
Mhm.
because the system of change is just off the charts.
Right. It's important. It's important that you mentioned that it's off the chart, and you're just helping you're quite like navigate helping people to navigate these challenging time or difficulty time. But for someone who would just look at the gas price going up and just feel frustration and do not understand like the energies that behind that, and kind of see it as in complaint mode versus someone who kind of are interested into this thing, then look at it and say, okay, these are the events that are expected to happen. We don't know how it's going to play out, but we know that there's a shift coming. So how do I
Yes,
best prepare for that? So that's very important that you mentioned that. One thing too I wanted to bring up is Jupiter in Leo, the planet
yes.
of expansion in Leo. So with that, would you say with all the leadership, because Leo is, leadership, right? In
Right.
some ways, and also independence, and bold. So would you say with the whole leadership that's playing out, we are seeing a lot of dark coming into light with these leaders across the globes? How would that shift happen? I mean
Well,
that change or from coming into like unauthentic, corrupted leaders.
well, the thing that
Like, does it show in the astrology that we're gonna all that dark is gonna come to light so we can start rebuilding and bring in more emerging and top leaders into our
sure.
world?
So the thing that's hard a lot of times is that energies have a very positive expression, they have a shadow expression. And Which one comes through is a lot dependent upon the choices that people make and where people are in terms of their ability to affect choices. So, the thing that we have right now is yes, Jupiter is going to go into Leo, which for Jupiter is a strong placement. Jupiter
Mm,
has an expansion in fiery energy. Leo obviously is a fire sign that wants to be creative and wants to lead. The difficulty is that the generation of leadership that's largely in power right now is a Pluto in Leo generation. So, Pluto
mm,
is one of the points that we look at generationally, and we think, well, what generation are you part of? We talk about Generation Z, Generation X, Generation Y, the silent generation, all of baby boomers. But
mm.
from an astrological standpoint, we look at it in terms of the patterns of Pluto. And so the leaderships, a lot of the leaders that are in power right now, they are Pluto and Leo individuals, and they just don't want to give up any of their power.
Wow.
And they're not really working to allow the next group to come in and lead. So that group is having to find a way to create that. So they're learning in a way of watching a world be sort of taken apart, if you will, by the behavior of this group that doesn't want to give up their power. And so there's a bit of, well, this Pluto, and Jupiter combination with Leo and who these people are is really a grab at trying to hold on to what was the height of the power, 50 years ago. And now we're in a different world. As to what the world will potentially look like, it's creating hopefully new leaders. That will be one part of it. And what those new leaders will have to address is, well, what does it look like to approach this world, especially with AI, which Uranus is a key player in its movement going into Gemini, where we're going to have to live in an AI world, and that's going to mean a lot of things that are still unclear.
Mm,
Now, it is probably reasonable to expect that AI's arrival is going to create, in many ways, higher unemployment, on a global scale. And we're going to have to ask, well, what does employment actually mean? It's going to be this question of, what's the value of our humanity if we can replace a huge number of jobs with AI, and then on top of that, robotics. That's another player that is out there. And when you start to merge those two things together, you can take a simple example. Do I want to send an individual up on a roof to repair a roof who could fall and injure themselves and also gets tired and all sorts of things? Or do I want to send a robot with AI up on a roof, which is not going to get tired, can work at night, is not going to make any errors? These are the kinds of things that people are probably feeling some fear about, and reasonably so. Um, but we also are going to have to deal with these kinds of changes being part of the experience. So the idea of knowing this is that you're going to have to think about, well, how did I set myself up in this story of life? How do I navigate it? What does it mean for me? What are the choices that leadership's going to make? But I think you're right. There's going to be a question around leadership over the next year because Jupiter will go into Leo on June the 30th, and it spends a year there. And then
mm,
it will move into Gemini, which will put it in the same sign as Uranus. So it'll be catching up to Uranus and eventually
yes.
making a synchronicity with Uranus. And so, there is a lot of just the amount of change we're just experiencing is just really very, very hard to process at its speed and at its depth. And that's why I think spiritual work right now, no matter who you're doing, whether you work with someone like me or you work with anybody else, being tuned to that is going to be the thing that helps you get through these turbulent times because they are going to be turbulent. I feel like that we're really not going to see a settling of energy probably until 2030 in terms of
Mm,
what these transits are doing because they need time to get into the new sign and become what they're going to become. But this is the year that really is the shifting year, no doubt about it.
mm. Yeah, one thing you mentioned is the whole job thing, right? Unemployment and the ability for people to kind of um, like accept that and not and hearing how AI is kind of, eventually will take over. So just, one thing I wanted to also focus on this community is creating jobs or, finding ways or like this is times where it's important to kind of bring your gift and talent forward. In other words, finding tapping into your creativity. What can you do that that would generate not only income but also ensuring that you're doing something that you love doing at the same time serving others because we're just moving in in times where integrity is important, right? The
Yes,
ability to do right and being authentic to yourself. So I always mention that is important, especially as you mentioned, like the older generation refusing to leave power. Eventually, they will.
sure.
The energies are just so rapid. Eventually, it will come to an end. But then, for this generation to come, what is it that you can do? Ensuring that you're not only creating but also serving at the same time, doing something that that's so fulfilling per se. So I think those are just questions that, we as a collective can ask ourselves and trying to answer and help each other elevate. So
Well, and again, looking at what Pluto does in Aquarius does mean that we are going to have to rethink what we think society needs to be.
mhm,
And it's also, one of the things I'm encountering with a lot of clients is clients are looking to move outside of the United States. They're looking
mm,
at the wider world and going, well, what is the rest of the world thinking about AI? What is the rest of the world thinking about community? I mean, one of the things that's a little bit challenging about being in a society that's driven by consumption the way the United States is that the model that is largely being pursued is what I call a greed model. In other words,
mhm,
can I get AI to fire as many employees as possible so that I can maximize my dividends for my shareholders or increase my ability to make money with whatever I'm doing?
yeah,
However, it's a zero-sum game because if I'm a large company and I'm using AI to eliminate 20,000 jobs, and the large company next to me is using AI to eliminate thousands of jobs, and the company next to them is doing it, who's going to end up buying the products,
mm,
right? Where are the people going to have income to get the things that you're producing? Now, other parts of the world are handling AI in a different way. They're putting up what we call more guardrails. They're not going to let AI just simply displace people and then
right,
kind of leave them to figure it out for themselves. But that's going to be where I think the United States is going to be feeling the most revolutionary pressure, is
mhm,
that it's going to be a question of, well, this has been a very prosperous part of the world. The United States has been one of absolutely the most prosperous nation states on the planet for the duration of its history. But what happens when it does shift into a more egalitarian world? Because that was really the way things were prior to World War II. And
mhm,
so this Uranian shift of energy that elevated the United States into an interesting position because it was the only country that wasn't economically broken after that, historically speaking, that now we've got the rest of the world is definitely doing as well technologically. They're as capable. They're doing in some ways better socially. And if we think about how we're treating people in terms of, let's just use the healthcare, for example. I've got so many clients right now that are facing the reality of probably not having health insurance because it's so expensive that they
mhm,
might as well just pay out of pocket anyway, because if they're going to be paying premiums that are upwards, I've heard people talking upwards of five, six, seven, $800 a month.
yeah,
At that point, you might as well just put that in savings yourself and do the best you can to take care of your health. But that's also going to be a transformative aspect of what's happening with these transits is we are going to have to get more responsible for
mhm,
ourselves.
right,
And that's going to be a bit of a shock to the system for a lot of people. This can mean, having conversations where what if you're, I mean, I certainly don't expect to get any Social Security. I'm on the edge of being able to get it. I'm 57, going to be 58, but I'm very comfortable with Neptune having gone into Aries and right behind that Saturn, which is a point of discipline and responsibility, just went into Saturn into Aries and is going to stay there for the next 2.5 years. So there is definitely an energy that it's like, well, what have you got to do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because these systems around us are starting to push it to a degree where we know that they're bankrupt in a way. And what does that
mhm,
mean for us in terms of our individual selves and the community we want to build? So, community building is going to be a huge, a massive part of the next, 5 to 10 years. And it is going to be um, oddly enough, and this is the thing, there's nothing new under the sun. We're going to
mhm,
probably be looking at trying to restore a more communal attitude where we are helping each other out, where we are getting to know our neighbors. I mean, I lived in a townhouse complex with probably 200 units. I didn't even know who was living next to me. I didn't even know that person on either side of me, right? And so if I needed something, where would I go to get help? I would normally, call EMS if it was a medical emergency or something like that. But we are going to have to rethink community. That's going to be a big part of this transformative energy.
And COVID actually played a major role into that. So
Yes,
looking at all of that and where everyone was so comfortable and staying on their own corner. So one of the things that encouraged me to start this community is just bringing people together across the
definitely.
globe. We can, talk to each other, be there for each other and support each other because, as you talked about Pluto going into Aquarius, that's community, that's
It is.
networking, that's bringing people that are, not only like-minded, but also ensuring that, people that are not as open-minded as they should be to know that they're also supporting anyway. Who knows? It's all about we're all connected at the end of the day. So
Yeah,
I think that's the most important things. So with that being said, we're gonna get close to wrapping up for the sake of time. So
sure.
how can people consciously use this year, right, to lay new foundation rooted in alignment and share vision and purpose, and also making sure that it's long-term sustainability. I think that's the key word, sustainability,
Right.
because as we transition into all these new energies you just shared with us and how they're going to affect us both at a personal and collective level. So it's important to also ensure that people have the tools to help them navigate as we start building this new Earth or new era, because it is an exciting time to be in planet Earth. That's what I think.
Well, I think the first thing is I would offer to people that listen to this is you're going to have to be patient with what's happening around you that you have no control over. And a lot of it is going to be about waiting and seeing how it plays out and being
Mm,
able to keep yourself from getting overwhelmed by anxiety or worry or fear because the changes are significant. You're not reading it wrong if you're sitting around going, "Oh my God, the world is really it is.
mm,
It really is changing a lot. It's really making a lot of rapid change." It is a great time to start thinking about, who are the people that you are connected with? Who are the relationships that are important? And do you need to start reaching out to build new relationships? Because
mm.
it's the relationships that we're going to probably end up needing to lean on. And we need to rethink how we want to be part of community as systems really do. I hate to use the word, but it's probably the right word. They're going to collapse, and
Yeah,
they may not collapse in one fell swoop, but they'll collapse it over time. I'll share an example that I think is kind of oddly interesting. My daughter sent me a video about a news story involving a university, and I think it was a student at either USC or UCLA, and she was suing the university for her tuition back because she discovered that her professors were using ChatGPT to run the classes. And she's like, well, if ChatGPT can run the classes, what do I need to pay this tuition for? And so how we're going to educate ourselves, how we're going to use things, these systems really are archaic. And not only that, but if we look at we're finally reaching a point where you hear the word, oh, there's a $36 trillion debt, that the United States has. We're reaching the point where the impact of that is likely to be that, yeah, there may be a period where, and I know this can be very hard for people to hear, Social Security checks will stop coming. They
yeah,
will, not be delivered at some point.
yeah,
And depending on where you are in your listening, like if you're listening and you're 30, don't even think about that being something as part of your story. If you're my age,
mhm,
it's like, well, I might get some of it, but I might not. If
mhm,
you're already receiving Social Security, what you'll probably see is a decrease in your benefits. They'll hack at it a little bit at a time, to reduce it. Like they've just recently raised the age for retirement by a couple of years. They're reducing some of the Medicare benefits. These are the kinds of things that they'll slowly erode at. So it's going to be really important, as you say, what do we need to do? We need to think proactively as individuals. We need to think, what do I need to do that I can do? And also don't get caught up in the social media or the idea that just because you can read the news that you have any effect on it. I mean, there's
Please
nothing I can do to change gas prices,
say that again.
right?
Say
And if
that
I
again so we can hear it.
right, so I don't need to look at the gas prices like my opinion has an effect on that because it just gets me in a state of anxiousness.
Mm,
So to some extent, we also have to recognize that we're at the mercy of other actors that are at a higher level, and they're making decisions that are affecting us that we're just going to have to react to because of how we chose to be part of the story. I didn't choose to be the head of a major corporation. You didn't choose to be the head of a major corporation or to run into politics where you're operating as a member of Congress and this sort of thing. So we're at the mercy of those people and their decisions until the things that change kind of settle in. So for individuals like myself or yourself or people that I work with, it's really about what can you do to maintain your center, your integrity, your peace as best you can, and then you know do your best to work with people that you care about and build those networks. That's going to be kind of the key, and it's not a quick fix.
Beautifully said. Any last word? Any
Uh,
final word?
No, I think the main thing is if you're interested in what I do, you can find out about me through my website, which is Black Unicorn, but unicorn is spelled UNYKORN. So it's blackunykorn.com. If you're
Yeah.
interested in seeing a little bit more about my personal practice, I'd be happy to help anyone that wants to reach out. But the main thing is that it is a life-changing period that's affecting the global and the personal and doing what you can to do self-care, to help the people that you care about, and to recognize what you can affect and can't affect. That's going to be the key.
I personally had the opportunity to work with you, and I really enjoyed our services, and it really helped me uh, really plan for 2026 as I understood that it was going to be a very rapid and as someone who's so earthy, all these like fire coming to me, I'm like, hold on,
Yes.
pause. I need to understand. So I was so grateful to kind of find you, Philip. You're very, I love the work that you do. Keep doing it. I'm also gonna share your contact on under the description.
Thank you.
So yeah, with that being said, I'm truly, truly appreciate you being the first guest here at the Divine Nurture. I could not think of anyone else to get us started. And let's see how this year unfolds. That's all I can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you
The
again.
place
So,
to be right.
so wonderful
Thank
to work
you.
with you.
I appreciate you.
Take care.